Okay, so before we jump into today's conversation, I want to take a moment to talk about why we're doing this podcast in the first place. I mean, in elite sport, we're all chasing the same thing: better decisions. Yet every week there seems to be a new technology, a new platform, a new methodology, all claiming to be the next breakthrough. The challenge isn't finding innovation anymore, it's figuring out what genuinely works. And that's why we've created the Perform podcast. Perform brings together the worlds of sport, science, and technology to have the conversations that matter, connect the people driving progress, and explore the ideas and innovations that can truly move the needle for athlete performance, health, and longevity. This podcast is part of that mission. It's a space where we can learn directly from the practitioners, researchers, leaders, and innovators shaping the future of elite sport. So if you're responsible for helping athletes perform at their best, or you're simply fascinated by the science of human performance, you're in exactly the right place. Now let's get into today's episode. Martin, welcome. Amazing to have you on the Can Perform podcast. How are you, my friend?
Very good, thank you. Very, very pleased to see you again, and thanks for having me.
Hey, look at us. You're the white, you're the goodie. I've got black. I'm the baddie here. Look, we should have had a chat about matching outfits. So
Yes, I'm glad to be in white as well. It could be also the flag of the peace flag. That's maybe in the context.
I've gone to the dark side.
Yes,
Martin, great to see you. I'm looking forward to this conversation. We speak on these podcasts every now and again, and I'm always the richer for it. I'm sure people know your background. Could you just give us your intro and a biography of your main landmarks through your career? That'd be amazing.
Yeah, very briefly, that's probably 20 years plus now that I'm in the performance sports science area, PhD, heart rate variability, team sport background, specialized in football, Aspire Academy, PSG, Lille, Olympique de Lyon, now Aspetar, back in Qatar. Not completely full-time, and on the side of that, developed my consultancy. So I'm working with a few clubs in Europe as well, and touring a little bit as well as a speaker, delivering workshops. So enjoying the variability in my role, the variety in the roles. But basically, it's mainly around the performance for science, a bit more rehab oriented now with my role at Aspetar as well. I act as a performance lead, but I mean the core, the core of the thing I'm very always interested is about mainly the sports science and the tech that I guess brings me here today as well.
Yeah, and not to, I'm sure you haven't forgotten, but you're such a prolific researcher. You run a podcast. You are an expert practitioner. You're a published author, and these are my words, not yours. But I've often seen you as a communicator and campaigner for better ways in which we can do the work that we do when we're supporting athletes and coaches. Would that be a fair reflection for you?
Oh, thank you. I mean, if you talk about the research, yeah, I'm not mentioning the research because I never had an academic research position. All this research came along the way. So writing those papers in the hotel rooms at PSG, this kind of thing. So it's always been on the side, but no, definitely. And I always use the research, as I think you kind of alluded to. I use the research just to extend my ideas and try to share what I was thinking about. And the research, of course, is a good way to validate your thoughts or sometimes invalidate them. But yeah, the research has always been a medium for me to share. Maybe educate is a bit too much, but at least, trying to help, trying to support the community. And that's where the two of us, we have a lot of in common because, I mean, actually, I was in China last week and I mentioned your book a few times about, supporting champion because there were guys I spent some time with. They worked in rowing and kayaking. So that was really close to your experience and all the stories, the good stories you talk in your book. So yeah, the supporting champion. I mean, my side has been more team sport and mainly football, but I think we definitely have the same view, or we had the same mission, at least, on trying to help. Maybe on your side, more the athletes directly. Myself, I quickly moved to helping more the staff, like being more managing a small team or now a bigger team, the workshops. So I'm probably more, I'm definitely more supporting staff who support athletes. That's probably where I place myself in the ecosystem. And the research comes into that as well to support my teaching. And like this pyramid of knowledge, that the best way to learn is to teach yourself. You retain more. You have to make sure that everything is clear for yourself, and you learn from that. So I think it's a nice triangle between still being involved in the practice at high level, the research, the teaching. That kind of this triangle works well. I'm enjoying myself being actually on the three angle of this triangle, depending on the day, the week, the time of the day.
Well, I love that little anecdote there about you going back to your hotel room and starting to process and form your thoughts by writing. I would love to tap into your reflections over the last 20 years. You've been in the dressing rooms, the training grounds, the Olympic centers. What's been some of the biggest, most important formative experiences and lessons that you've had? First with athletes and players, but also then coaches. What are the big experiences that you look back and think, cool, my career, my practice fundamentally changed with those interactions?
Yeah, I think with players, so as I said, for the last now 3-4 years, I've been less in contact. I mean, I'm still this morning I was watching a lactate test. I was with an athlete, and there was guys in the gym, but I'm not coaching myself. That's what I mean. I'm still around. But, yeah, I've seen the athletes owning more and more their career. And every came through professionalization. And I mean, I climbed this ladder of because started in a sport that was amateur-ish in France, so it was handball. I mean, everyone was kind of paid professional, but you can't compare with when I moved later on to PSG, and so you change in sport, you change the sport, you change also with time, so everything becomes more professional. There's more money, there's more, and more you get more team. So what I'm saying is that now, and that's also what I'm doing on the side as well. I'm helping individual athletes to build their own team. This is new. 25 years ago, when I started as a strength conditioning coach in handball, you were the only resource for those guys. Right. And I would do a bit of everything, the gym, the running, the nutrition, the education about the sleep. We were already doing something. And now those guys, especially at the high end of their sports, but yeah, whatever the sport, they have a team around them. Of course, the physio, the nutritionist, the guy who does a bit the strength work. So, I mean, they have understood, most of the top guys, they have understood that they need to look after their body, and they have only one. And it's about being resilient. It's about the competition becomes higher and more, everything becomes more competitive, that they need to be sharp, they need to recover better, they need to be, again, the resilience is a big part of the things. So on the player side, that would have been the biggest change that I've noticed. More and more focus on the care, on their own care and their performance for longevity, career prolongation, these kind of things, which has definitely some benefit when it's well managed. But I've, of course, observed also the downside of it when it's more, they do it for the sake of doing it without a real guidance. It becomes a bit messy. People take advantage of that, because there's a lot of money. So now they sell them more services they don't need. They start to do double session in the afternoon when they already have a good session in the morning at the club. Then it can become counterproductive if it's not well managed. And I've been into this position as well, and sometimes on both sides of trying to make sure that it's whatever it's built around the athlete is for his benefit and not just for someone's pocket money or back to those practitioners external to clubs that sometimes want to do a bit too much more for them than the athletes. But that's another discussion. But long story short, about your question is about, yes.
Yeah, that reflection of the growth of the support team has effectively driven performance. It's prolonged people's careers. There's greater value in having specialists in each of the different areas. But then what that comes is filtering and prioritizing that and making sense of a lot of voices in athletes' ears. And now the spillover then I'm hearing from you is that people are hungry for performance improvement, but they don't necessarily have that filter. And so that they are being sold all sorts of extra private consultations, private extra work that's going to give you the edge, that means that perhaps the coordinated, planned injury management, rehabilitation, performance progressions are at risk.
Yep. You just summarize exactly what I thought with even better words. But yes, can't agree more.
Now, come on in. So give us your view on how coaches have changed, and or the big interactions you've had with coaches that have changed the way that you've worked.
Yeah, there's probably two sides of that. The first is alongside what we just described about more professionalization, more services, you get more and more specialization. Of course, as I said before, like we were doing everything, and now you have someone that do it, especially team sport, elite football, have someone that just does the gym, just the speed coach now, just like you get highly specialized. That's one bit, and then with this specialization, I mean, everyone wants to have a PhD. Everyone wants to bring the technology in because it looks good. And then this is where sometimes we are losing the global picture, and we're losing and that's what I'm helping clubs with, about working better together, integration, breaking the silos, all these kind of things, because the specializations often goes against the integration, unfortunately. And in theory, you have better specialists, you should be able to do everything a bit better. But often, because they stay on their own side, it's not always very productive as well. So this is this extra specialization, the willingness to push everything. Yeah, maybe the PhD technology is probably the symptom of that. Is that you want to have a PhD in strength to be able to be a better strength coach. Who said that you need a PhD to be a good coach? To be a good coach, you definitely have to be able to read the literature, to be up to date, to understand the different methods, but you don't have to create and to spend hours, because it requires so much work to produce research. It's not obligatory. And this is where people sometimes don't realize the amount of work that is required to run a PhD. And they're going to almost kill themselves to work overnight, in weekends. They have a family. Then the PhD takes them 10 years to finish it. But why? I think this is where sometimes people should better choose what they want to be. That's where sometimes I think the industry has been too far. You don't need to have a PhD to be a good practitioner, and you can be a very good practitioner with no research background. And on the other side, you can be a good researcher, but then you need to understand also what's happening on the field. And that's another discussion. But yeah, this extra specialization is on one side needed, but probably have some collateral damage as well, I would believe.
Collateral damage from this fragmenting and
yes,
and an inflation of credentials within that system. If you've got MSc, PhD, extra accreditation, there's a hierarchy or a reward to that. But fragmentation from the specialization of the goalkeeper's sprint coach, the central midfield's right leg coach. I'm being sarcastic now, but we're not far from sense of specialization.
Yes, too much. And now you look at clubs recruiting. If you don't have at least an MSc, they don't even interview you. Sometimes this is where sometimes it goes too far. Even though you need a minimum of that, and it reflects some sort of curiosity if you've done some research and so on. But it's the frontier are a bit blur, and I don't know where it's going. That's my point.
Well, one area that I know you have been a real voice on, and researching, but also helping people in terms of their understanding and interpretation, is this area around workload management. And I've specifically chosen the word management, not monitoring, because workload monitoring is making sure the GPS units are in, making sure they're uploaded, making sure the report comes back, and then not necessarily doing anything about it. So I'd love to get your thoughts on particularly this provocative blog that you put out recently, Slaves to GPS Norms. Where's your thinking at in terms of how clubs, particularly in football, are letting data drive performance in a way that is not helpful?
A few weeks ago, now early June, we co-hosted a workshop with Raymond Verhegen. Raymond, for those especially in football polarization, they know him. He's a Dutch coach, and he's written now, I don't know, probably thousands of books and around football polarization. I really like him because he has a very critical mind, and that's why we decided to organize this event together. And one of his main points, which was a bit was interesting for me, is that he believes that sports scientists and sports science doesn't have even a place in football, because he believes that all these jobs have been made by ourselves to create us a job. And he says the coach, a well-educated coach, knows enough about periodization to know when he can have a bigger session than an easier, harder session, than a lighter session. And the good educate coach don't need to see a GPS report at all. But because we wanted to make the sport more professional, because there was more technology available, we created those positions. We created those GPS analysts in clubs. And then because those guys are there, first of all, they have to justify their job. So they have to measure things and then send those reports to say, hey guys, I've measured something, and it becomes important. And so it's highly critical. And of course, I think I still value the place of GPS in assessing a very selected and limited portion of the load. And that's another discussion about the fact that it's only external locomotor. We're still missing a lot of multi-directional type of work. So it's a very limited portion of the external load, but still. So I still value this, but we have to understand the limitation. But I see where he's coming from about now trying to say that, okay, today we should run only this amount of distance of high speed running, this number of axle. Where is this coming from? You know, there's no rationale of why you should run 400 or 500 meters. So that's what we've tried to do. And I actually invited also Raymond when we did those 3 publications, trying to bring a rationale about why 6 versus 800 meters. But it's difficult because it's the way we collect this data. It's just accumulated distance. There's no relationship with the actual muscle strain, but we still try to link that to injury rate as well to bring some rationale. But the links are so weak in between this GPS load-ish, inverted comma, versus either injury and even performance. Because now, if you talk about performance in football, it's everything but running. It's about scoring goal first. And sometimes running helps, sometimes running does not help. How do you assess the relevance or what should be an ideal load periodization GPS-wise when there is no proper KPIs to verify or to check against? It's impossible. So Raymond's take is like, okay, you measure whatever you want. Whatever you measure, it's very incomplete, but you don't know anyway if you have to run this amount distance or X or Y distance. So why measure it? Just to create you a job. So it's going far, but I kind of agree a little bit with him, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there is, I don't think that is too controversial. I have a similar observation about physiologists in Olympic environments where they have created a case for the cool down lactate monitoring. So swimmers are a classic where they go and race and then they go into the pool and they'll cool down at a certain speed, 50% of VO2 max, roughly speaking, until their lactate is a certain level, which might take 45 minutes. Now that warrants a job in the Olympic Village. Under what rationale? It's like, does anyone have any evidence of showing that a lactate recovery kinetic curve can correlate with repeat performance? I don't know of it, but I know a lot of people have said I should do that in the Olympic Village. So that's kind of my equivalent, where effectively we've got tournament theory here. We're creating jobs for people, but we're also getting players, I presume, locked on to what was my distance covered, how many high speed runs have I done, and not necessarily the markers of contribution to the team play.
Exactly. And this is where this specific technology has caused probably more harm than anything else, because it's been wrongly, poorly interpreted and used. I know there's other use case where it's a no-brainer. You're rehabbing an hamstring, you know that speed is sensitive and you want to build up the speed. So having even live running speed of the player is helpful, because then you can see what's happening. So there's a lot of proper use cases. But the thing, and back to this paper with Tom Little, a slave of norms, is that now you have, because we don't have a rationale of doing X or Y distance, now you go to the norms that, that's what we've done last week. So now you have a red flag if you do more than last week. But is it a problem? We don't know. But this is how the practice works, you know. So this is where there is so little evidence that this is probably causing more harm than anything. Rehab, other aspects, no-brainer. It is useful and it should be used. And then this is why I'm still heavily involved with all the work from Andrew Gray, this guy living in New Zealand. He developed an analyzer like a while ago now. When we get more information to improve the signal of the GPS, now we can capture multi-directional mechanical power, these kind of things. This is super helpful. So that's what I mean. You know, I'm criticizing GPS on one side, but I'm still willing to improve the technologies, at least for what's the use we make of it. At least we get better data. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying, we should use it better and at least improve the signal as well.
So We'll zoom out in a moment, but you've just touched on one of the key points here, that norms are just mirrors of the past. So that sense that it's good to compare and contrast with the past, but it's not necessarily something to hang all of your judgment interpretation. Is that a fair interpretation?
Yeah, because everything is based on this. I mean, it makes sense at the start that you want more or less a stable chronic load, and you can discuss all the limitation of the proper acute chronic ratio, this kind of thing. But that's not, I think, whatever the sport, everything will agree that a good stable chronic load is better, and you don't want crazy spikes on one side or the other. So this is how those norms are created, and any deviation from the norms sends a flag. But the question is, because we are just so stuck on those norms, we don't know if those norms are actually appropriate. And there's never been a challenge to those norms. Why don't we now we do double or we do half? No one has tried, because everyone copy what the others are doing.
Yeah. Well, they're afraid, right? And
Yes.
Correction to those norms. The top-up fallacy, this idea of seeing athletes doing extra stuff just to conform with the norms on a dashboard.
Yeah, I've been the first to do that, and I still understand where there's a place for that. But again, don't want to bring everything around the Raymond, but he has a nice example where he says the coach has designed a good training session, and you had a player very, very efficient, and because he's been always at the right place at the right moment, he ran less than the others. So actually, he done a great job because he anticipated the balls. He's been very clever. So it's difficult to say, hey, guy, now you need to run more, because he's done his job even better than the others. But we, as the conditioning guys, we said, no, you need to run more to be prepared, because the match is coming on Saturday. You're going to probably have to run more anyway, because we know your usual stats. Normally you run this. So let's prepare you physically. But then the solution probably, because that's actually treating the symptom of a suboptimal training session that did not make this player run. So instead of treating the symptom with extra run, the idea is just to design a better training session so the player end up eventually running part of the training session, and then there's no need for top-ups anymore. That makes more sense, because also it's linked to the game and just feeding a dashboard and this kind of thing. So this is where I've been pretty active and trying to preach to change a little bit this approach, because at the end it's going against the logic of preparing players. Again, it's very football centered what I said, but yeah, you don't prepare players while having them run. You prepare players by playing a certain style of play that may have us required to run, but it's part of playing first. The run comes second as a consequence of those or their playing actions, and that's why you prepare them playing rather than running. But yeah, that's very specific on this. But,
well, it isn't. I think this is part of the reason we wanted to get you on the podcast, because this is the intersection between the technology and performance. And for me, there's a missing piece here around a conversation that needs to be had of adjustment. That you have a goal in mind to develop players, and that you are using these technological tools to lever that conversation. And for me, for example, there's lots of athletes in the lab, for example, that really I would just love to have had just a very direct conversation with them. But the laboratory, as well as the gym and the force platform, they have a seriousness and perhaps a theatre behind them that mean that people then want to know what their result is, and therefore, what are we going to do about it? Now, you can just print out the report and away you go, or you can say, as a consequence of this data, this is what we should be changing. Mm-hmm. This gives us objective views as to what we need to adjust and tweak, risk manage, etc. But this is what tomorrow or next week looks like. This is what I'm sensing you do really well, where you're able to ask the lateral question that enables people to be better set up, have a more effective session, for example.
Yes, and I think when I was listening to you about using, of course, that's what we try to do, using technology data to make better decisions and so on, where also the profession has probably drifted a bit too far, is that you want to make decision on the fly on the same day. So again, typical practice in a lot of team sports. That's also not, I just don't want to talk about football, but they do it in rugby as well. They do it in Australian football. A couple of days after the match, they do a groin squeeze, they do a jump, they do a neuromuscular test. And based on that, okay, half of the squad cannot train full because they have not recovered. And also that I said us, I should say, sports scientists, we're taking too much responsibility on the training program. The question is it big because you have not recovered 10% you're only at 90% of your groin squeeze capacity, or you jump only at 93%? Does that mean, okay, that means that's probably true that you have not recovered, but does that mean that you have to train only 70% of the session to avoid injury? We have no clue about that, and now we pull out players from training because we want to with the intention of preventing injury. But in the end, we just restrain them to train. And that's the most important session for the coach who wants to build the team for the weekend. And this is happening. And we as an industry have accepted that. And I think this is where it's going too far. And I'm still the first to convince people to monitor weekly, and all those tests I just described, I'm happy. And I'm convincing people to do them, but not to act on a daily basis for the same session, but use them as a trend. Because now, week after week, we realize that this guy has actually a progressive drop in strength. His posterior chain is not recovering in terms of flexibility. And it's those trends that can help us now to understand how players respond. And then you can look back to training load, to dose, the response. Do you have to have additional intervention, and whether it's unload, deload, specific systems are targeted versus others? But it's a medium to long-term trends that we need to follow. And I believe into that, as you would probably do even more in individual sports. But the practice of he has not recovered today, he has to do half of the session today, I think this is going too far. This is going way too far, but this is the actual practice.
And so for me, there is a natural risk management. People are worried that, obviously the sort of availability is critical for team sports to succeed. And people are pulling back then because they don't want to break athletes, but also they potentially mean that they are not creating, from a progressive overload point of view and adaptation, they're not creating more robust athletes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by putting a priority on availability, it's very unlikely that you're also improving performance. It's a fine balance between both, but that's the art of coaching. That's the art of coaching.
I mean, I remember having a conversation with a backroom team, a Premier League club, and a player. I won't name club. I won't name player. A player was recurring hamstring injuries, wasn't available in the rehab room an awful lot. And so I talked to them about exercises that they should be prioritizing in the gym. Oh no, we can't do that. The hamstring wouldn't like that. I said, okay, what do you know about the hamstring? Have you done any isokinetic dynamometry? Oh, no, we couldn't do that. I'm like, well, if you can't do a test, how would you know how robust that hamstring is? And if it's so delicate, then how are you going to return that person to full play, full speed? It just went circular. And that's a problem. I guess we've got to try and find ways of getting into that conversation and creating sense and judgment.
Yep, definitely. This is where, thankfully, the technology is also helping a little bit, because now we have more wearables, more sensors, so we can capture more, like this, as a lot of people have mentioned, I've called that like a more indivisible monitoring or embed monitoring to training. So you have encoders, and part of the routine in your gym, you're lifting and you have an encoder. So you have a bar displacement velocity, can use that as an index, same weight lifted. Today it's faster than usual. Okay, you're improving your strength, or so this is a way to test without testing. So at least this is where a lot of people in team sport have gone, to leverage this new technology to get more frequent information without practically officially testing. But in the context of a proper injury or some players with a strong deficits, at some stage that's not enough, and you need to do a proper screening. And this is where sometimes things are easier said than done for various reasons.
And so, big question then, how do we get ahead of this? So sporting directors, head coaches, athletes who we might have created a dependency on metrics, how do we get them to a place where they're suitably nuanced, probabilistic, and engaged in using metrics despite its limitations?
Yeah, this is where you need those decision makers on the sports science side. So the typical high performance manager, head of performance, or sometimes the people in charge of those multidisciplinary teams, they need to have a strong coaching background as well. They need to understand this side as well. Otherwise, it becomes too rigid. And as you said, a number becomes a number and they don't have this flexibility. And I've seen that so often where brilliant scientists, brilliant sports scientists, but lacking the understanding of the game, and the club, for various reasons, has given them a lot of power. And then I've heard stories where coaches they feel isolated. They say, "Yeah, I don't have my players. They're healthy, but they took me 5 players today." Again, it's what's the solution? Educating better those practitioners, and for clubs to make sure that because especially this figure of the head of performance, whether medical, head of performance is a very poor name title because he can integrate every kind of responsibility. So I rather mention the head of the multidisciplinary team, and this multidisciplinary team includes the dog, the physio, the conditioning, the sports. So those practitioners, and the person that is in charge of this team needs to have this ability to balance and understand that what matters more is training availability first. So train, and then everything that the program is about helping the players to first train. And then this is their job to make them more robust and make them recover better, but prioritize the recovery. And on the other side, you need also coaches sometimes to be also strong enough to be able to say, no, I need this player and I want him to train. Because you have a bit of both. 20 years ago, the coach, they didn't have this figure of the whole sports science department, and they were making all the decisions. Then the club started to say, no, we don't want the coach to make all the decisions, especially if he stays only 6 months. So they gave more power to the departments, which is fine. And I've been the first to want to have more power in those situations. But again, sometimes this is going too far as well. So you need a proper collaboration between the coaching staff and this permanent team of practitioners with a strong aim.
It feels as though there's a need for an integration of responsibility so that there is a shared discussion about the probabilistic route. We think probably this is the best route. We think probably we need to be going down this route, as opposed to people devoid. They're in the gym. I'm not responsible. They're out on the training pitch. I'm not responsible, etc. So it's that silo thinking of I'm just doing my bit, and needs to be much more integration. I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. In the case of rehab and return to play, this is probably where things work better. Because then you're talking about one player, and then you have different practitioners working in an integrated manner with him, from the physio, from the conditioning, and then also that, okay, is he a bit short to play this weekend or not? And then you're going to bring together the coach, the player, the head physio, the conditioning, and those guys will actually discuss. And the player will be actually consulted in this case, especially if it's an important player, because you want to know if also he feels ready to play. So in this situation, it works well because it's a consultation. Everyone is kind of discussing and sharing. But it's more about, my point was about more the healthy players that have not completely recovered from the match. And then we sometimes do crazy stuff with them. And then we don't ask them because it's far from the match, so they don't need to be involved.
And so where's this going? If you were to have a sort of a magic wand and think 10 years ahead of time, where would you like to see the field of sports science advising through technology, but advising coaches and players? Where would you like to see us go?
Yeah, more awareness of the context, more having sports scientists less naive, understanding better what matters, and understanding what is more important, and like I said, the context. And it's about maturity. It's about taking distance from for those numbers that can be useful, that are useful. But again, it's always the context that drives the decision in the end, rather than those numbers first, and then you're missing out on important aspects. That's why also I've been in clubs where they just don't want a sports scientist, or they're just angry about them because again, that's Raymond, he calls us the cowboys. You're a cowboy because you have a PhD and a GPS, and you just tell everyone what to do. So it's lacking this understanding of the context, and probably often some overconfidence. That's the other discussion about having educated sports scientists. They speak well, they have some nice argument, they create nice dashboards, and then you have the coach with a completely different background who doesn't have the same vocabulary, and they get impressed. And that's how sometimes this kind of not hierarchy, but this dynamic, the strength dynamic favors sometimes those more educated people just because they have a better ability to speak, or they have a nice vocabulary.
Hey, look, I mean, it's an evolving field, isn't it? And I think we've got a lot of people creating a lot of busy work with GPS, training load monitoring, but not the management. And with the advent of AI, we're going to find a lot of people perhaps with work skills that aren't necessarily going to be needed in the future. And that's going to demand an evolution of about how you create impact. I'm sure there'll be an app that you'll be able to download in 5 years' time that will be able to do all of that collation and collection of information, but the interpretation bit will still need somebody who's developed a trusting relationship and understood the context, seen the white of someone's eyes as to judge whether they're tired or not, or ask them the question of that. That feels as though, as sports scientists, unless we get ahead of that as a skill set and craft, AI is going to leave a lot of people unemployed.
Yeah. Yes and no. That's a discussion I had with a friend colleague yesterday. Where are we going? Because we are heavily into, and the both of us, we are now using Claude daily. I just my wife takes the piece that I'm spending more time with him than her, you know. So Claude is, and we create tools, we create dashboards, we create web pages. It's just incredible. At the start, we're like, okay, this is going to bring everyone on the same page. Because people, like, I don't have a strong programming background. So now I can do stuff that I could not do before, like Power BI, this kind of stuff. I have a basic level, but now what I'm doing is pretty cool. So I was like, okay, maybe you're going to bring leverage a little bit the level, and the guys that could not program and code, they can do it. But the thing is now, the guys who can code, they can do even better codes. I think in the end, it's actually going to increase the differences between people. And either you do it, you step in. This is what everyone says about AI anyway, but I'm really into that personality that you get so much done. It's an extension of your ideas. And so I feel that the discrepancies between people are going to be even bigger.
Yeah.
Because the users are going to be super users and super powerful, doing super powerful stuff. And those who are not using it, they're gonna miss out on that. And then they're going to be left for sure. So yes, to your point, yes, you probably don't need to hire someone just to code or just the data science now in clubs, because I don't need the data scientist now. I just throw into Claude and hopefully I get something that is pretty decent on my own. Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to meet Martin Bot in the future, your secondary Claude assistant. But what we can't replace is great conversations like this. And I'm really appreciative of this. Before I let you go, can I ask you that you wrote this great book, E-Goals, with George Perry, with some excellent contributors, including myself. How's the response been? It's just such a joy of a book. It's such a great resource. How's the response been for that?
No, thanks for mentioning that. Yes, it's been soon. 5 years and a half. It was October.
Really?
Yes. So
it's still fresh material. It's still good.
Yes. No, thank you. No, I think it's been. I wish the book would have gone through other industries. That people in other business would say, okay, ego management is the same stuff, but no. So it remained pretty selective to our world, sports science, medical. So the people we just discussed now for half an hour. So it remained a little bit inside this circle, but it's good because it has helped me myself. As you said before we started to record. Offline, your colleagues were very nice with me and telling how happy they were to have me on the show. And and we said, okay, but this guy he wrote a book on ego, so he cannot have the volume too high. So actually, he helped me to position myself a little bit and. See what I mean? Like a disclaimer. No, don't worry. Look like I'm French, which doesn't help, because we have this this reputation of thinking too much about ourselves. So at least it's been good for me it's been a bit of a shield to say, no, don't worry. I'm not this guy. I'm not this guy. I still have my feet on earth. The main concept, the ego volume, I think this is still a key concept that I like, is that it's not about leaving your ego at the door or not having an ego. No, you need one, but just use it when it's appropriate. And that's the concept of the volume. And I'm very much I'm reflecting myself a lot about that and about how people reacted, as you ask. People making reference to the concept, or Martin, you should raise a bit your volume today. Or when we had this workshop with Raymond Verhegen, destroying the GPS, saying that we were fraud as poor scientists. That was in front of 60 people. The people were looking at me and say, "You're not saying anything?" I say, "No, because listen first." So turn down this ego volume, listen, be humble, understand what he has to say, and now turn it up to defend your position. So I think this applies. At least I apply it daily to myself, at least.
Yeah, I have to say it's such a valuable resource for practitioners and
Thank you.
wanting
Thank
to
you.
improve their performance, staying grounded, but also having the assertiveness to step up when they need to. And just the collection of great minds that you've got in the book, that it makes you feel connected, it reassures you, but it actually makes you ambitious too. So yeah, I love the book. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Martin, always a pleasure to talk to you. Congratulations all you've done and all you're achieving, and thank you so much for the conversation today.
It's been a pleasure. We've been pretty football oriented, and I know the audience is probably not only about that, but the main themes likely apply to other context, which is always the way I'm thinking, like context matter more than anything. So yeah, hopefully that's large and wide enough. But no, it's been a pleasure to catch up again. As I said, mention your book as well in China last week. So I keep talking about you. I also mentioned the trust equation. That's you taught me as well. The trust equation.
Trust equation. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe
modified.
I changed it a little bit. I put it my way, but you need the accountability and a few important stuff around.
Yeah. Credibility, reliability.
Yes.
I then changed the word intimacy to closeness. Divided by self-orientation. Yeah. Because intimacy doesn't translate that well in some cultures. So
but divided by selfness, this kind of things. It's back to the ego and being at the service of others first to be trusted. So yeah, I don't know which conversation I mentioned that from you no later than last week. So you see, we were
amazing.
Connected.
Yeah, we seem to be referring other people to each other's work. So that's generous. And Martin-Buchheit.net is a place that people can learn and discover more. Anywhere else that you want to promote your high intensity interval training podcast?
Training Science, that's Training Science podcast. And then we have the Hit Science platform, Sport Performance Science Reports. That's the journal, the review-free online platform for everyone that wants to try to publish stuff that may not make it through the usual journals. And it's a great platform, or opinions, experts, expert opinions. Everything that you cannot publish in a proper journal has a space in my platform, and that's also very useful. I'm very active on that. That's where I publish my stuff as well. So I can't be bothered now going through the usual publication journey or circus almost. So yeah, so that's another things to check on. Sport Performance Science Reports. Probably other things I forgot, but social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, I'm active as well. So yeah, see you there.
Amazing. Martin, thank you so much again.
A pleasure. Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Brilliant as ever.